So I've had like a small revelation, we'll call it. Possibly it's an evolution of an idea that I've kind of like been building slowly but surely in my brain. But basically it has resulted in me being far less concerned about the resulting geometries of messing with this thing. And I've actually started playing around with this thing a little bit, just like being in here and being like, oh, I want to try this. Oh, I want to try that. And that's why this older Fox Float RP23 is on here now. Remember back near the end of the year when I was like messing with this thing a lot and we were building it into what it was, and well, for some reason I want to go completely in the opposite direction and just kind of see what happens when I start like throwing different recommended shock lengths and strokes and all that at it. And you know, just kind of experiment with it. It's an older bike. I want to mess around with it and not just read forums and have people tell me why you can't do that, and do it anyway. I almost started messing with this thing without hanging out with you guys, but I was like, wow, this is a perfect opportunity to hang out with all my YouTube friends. Not gonna be able to ride it, but whatever. I like pulling stuff apart, put it back together. You get it. So as you'll recall, the RockShox that we had on there originally, this one here, this Monarch, the rebound on this after I did like a 50-hour rebuild on it still was non-adjustable, and to get it to be adjustable again, I think we would have had to pull all this apart and rebuild in there, which I'm not necessarily afraid to do and I still want to try. But for like a quicker fix, without having to buy a bunch of stuff, I bought this X-Fusion O2 Pro with proper working rebound adjustment. I know I said in that video, I was like, well, I want to go with like, the non-usual suspect. This was also cheaper. That truly was a big decider going for it. Was a little bit afraid to venture too far away from the recommended shock length and stroke length. So I had bought this X-Fusion to replace this RockShox, both being 200 millimeters eye to eye, 57 millimeters of stroke. That means when I put it together on this bike, it's exactly the way it was from factory, save for the offset bushings that we put in. But if I'm honest, this shock is really not much better than this. So I'm eating my words slightly. Oh well, here we are. Now this old Fox that's in here that's 10 mils shorter eye to eye and does have 7 millimeters shorter stroke. It being old and worn out and the DU bushings are a little clapped out, I can actually feel a very substantial difference between rebound speeds on this than I can on either one of those. So, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna try it. It's installed now. I don't love the way it looks, but there's a problem with trying to run it right side up. And I want to try and fix that with some of my offset bushings and then maybe mess with some other stuff. I don't really have a true end goal here. It's been in my brain that I wanted to work on this bike. Especially because tomorrow we're going to be working on it again. Okay, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to show you why it doesn't want to go in right side up. And then we're going to try and fix it. See where the Schrader air valve is? It actually kind of interferes with the linkage here. See how it hits see it hitting? Not really any good. Could file away maybe a little bit. Is that a good idea? Probably not. All right. Okay, I did get this on here without the other bushings or anything, though it did get done with a little bit of danger homing. Just the slightest amount of machining to get the valve to clear. Probably just like a millimeter right at the top there. As it goes through its travel, it doesn't need to go in, it actually travels away. So working and looking forward to everyone in the comments saying I'm going to die because I filed a tiny bit of linkage. And actually that brings up a good point that I would like to address. Whenever I grind something for clearance or like file something for clearance, do stuff like that, if you feel like you want to do the same thing, take that risk on yourself. I can't make that decision for you, and I won't make that decision for you. If you ask me, I think you should always err on the side of not grinding and not cutting things. But I do it all the time. So now that this is on here, I think I'm gonna do the offset bushings too. And you know what? Just for the hell of it, I'm gonna pull the air can off this and just re-grease all the seals just for fun. Now, these DU bushings, these are completely and utterly trashed, especially this lower one. The top I could probably leave, but considering I've got no skin in the game in this at all, it's an old bike, it's an old shock that Colin had, seems like the perfect candidate to try and throw some new DU bushings in just to get the experience. That is the most fun part about working on old stuff that you're not super worried about anymore. Gives you the opportunity to learn and gives you the opportunity to do dumb things. Well, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know if I'm even gonna bother with the top one. All right, this is where we're at. And this is definitely going to be the limit for rear suspension modifications. So, as I mentioned, we're running an older Fox float. It is 190 eye to eye, 10 millimeters shorter than what comes on this thing's stock. Now, the stroke of the stock shock is 57 millimeters. This one happens to be 50, so we certainly do lose some travel by running it this way, which is okay because when I pull all the air out of this shock and let the wheel go through its travel, it starts to rub on this blue linkage here if I'm running both of the offset bushings in their low positions. So considering that, I'm running the offset bushing up top in the lower position, and in the lower eye of the shock, I'm just running the normal bushing, effectively making the shock 13 millimeters lower than what is stock, 7 millimeters less stroke, and that is the limit. That is as far as we can go without having a rubbing tire at full travel. Somewhat comically, the space between the valve and the linkage here is so tight that I can't actually run a valve cap. So anytime that I decide I need to put air into this thing, well, I'm going to have to undo the top linkage bolt and put air in or take it out, and be relatively careful about not just putting the pump on there without making sure there's not a bunch of stuff sitting in the valve ready to go in and become sandpaper to all of the internals of this shock. Fun experiment nonetheless. Basically what I'm most pumped about is a shock that actually has some rebound adjust that's usable, and when I take this thing dirt jumping, it doesn't feel like it wants to kill me every time I go off something. Okay, that's it. That's all I want to talk about.